What up, y'all? Another week is coming to a close, which means that the weekend was filled with tournaments, and y'all, it continues to not disappoint. What up, y'all? It's your boy Ben here, and we're going to be taking a look at the meta, how it is shifting, and just kind of what those best decks are, so that way you can stay on top of everything, so that way you can prepare actually for a rank that's also coming up here pretty soon as well. So I'm excited to dive deep into this. As always, if you like the content, go ahead, hit that like, subscribe, and click that notification bell button so that you don't miss out on a thing. We're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers in less than 3 months, and with your help, we can definitely get there. All right, so as we know, we have our Ursi Day tournament, which is like about 1,400 players, and then we also had a couple of them, so we're rounding out to like 1,700, 1,800 players over the weekend. And so let's just go ahead and kind of like take a look at where the standings fall and what decks are being played. And so let's talk about the biggest tournament over the weekend, the Ursi Day tournament, and this Weavile Darkrai deck right here is the winner. Like, it came in first place. And before we get into everything, like, if you made it this far, let me know in the comment section below if you like the decks like this far out. Usually I have them like this closer and kind of like scroll through to talk through everything, and that way you can see more of the cards. But we'll try out this week similar to like this, that way everything's out with me in frame as well too. Let me know if you like it the way that we usually have it. If you like it this new way, I would love your feedback on that. Oh, so with that out of the way, Weavile Darkrai, and it's so fun to just kind of see some of these things pop up and just kind of taking advantage of it. You have 2 Leafs here, you have 2 Cyruses here. Interestingly enough, there are no Dawns being played. Instead, they're opting out to use a Mars. And so it's just kind of curious if like you have your Darkrai out, obviously, so maybe you're doing your chip damage with Darkrai, and then you just evolve into Weavile, and like that's just enough. You have your potion, you have giant capes for survivability in case you run into any grass decks, and yeah, it's just interesting. I wonder if like this could be the Dawn replacement. I might just do that when I'm trying out. But since you're also like just like 2 EX decks, if you knock out one, this Mars then can be played to just have your opponent only draw 1 card. Either way, Weavile and Darkrai EX is showing out and being like, hey, y'all, we're still here, we are still powerful. It's actually pretty cool to see, especially when people are like, here's a new shiny thing. Darkrai's like, I'm still him. So I like the configuration of this deck. The Mars is the only one slot that I think you can easily like use, or like use something else from here. But also let me know if you decide to stick with Mars and how that feels. Up next, we have this Starmie EX Palkia EX deck, which kind of feels like in a similar vein of what we just saw with the Darkrai and Weavile EX. This was the winner of another big tournament over the weekend as well. And here, again, you're looking at something that is going to be able to evolve into an EX and attack very quickly as a stage 1. Starmie EX, it needs no introduction, as you're attacking for 90 energy for 2 energy. That free retreat also allows you to kind of just maneuver around the board pretty easily. Water decks got this huge bump, as if they didn't need it already, with Irida, so meaning that the early damage that you're tanking here while you're building up your Palkia EX in the back line. You're healing right here, and the Misties also can just net you some free wins as well. So this is a really strong deck in that sense. Pokeball here essentially is guaranteeing that you're getting your other Staryu and your other Palkia. Since you only have 3 basics in here, you're gonna get that first basic, and then those 2 Pokeballs will get the other ones as well, trying to keep it as consistent as possible in here. I like this deck. This feels like very fast, very if things flow right, you're ending games pretty quickly. It's very hard to keep up with a Starmie EX once it's going, and just imagine this. Even if Misty rolls 1 heads here, you go first. It's Staryu up front. 1 heads with your Misty means you attack right there for 20. They get to use their energy. Right now that you beat them, you got the energy advantage. they go, and then now you get the evolution, and since you already have that 1 energy there, you're now dealing 110 right out the gate. So that's pretty powerful, and with the way a lot of these water decks work out, you can see that quite often. And so it's no surprise that this deck went 12-2 in its run to take first place, seeing its consistency of being able to draw its basics, and then now you're just kind of curious of like how well you can draw your evolutions, but here they were able to do that. So coming up next is the Dialga EX Arceus EX version, where it just kind of settles where this is like the dream, like this is like where the deck is finally landing here. And in both cases of the tournaments, Arceus EX did not take away the win. So it's really cool to see that, like, oh, here's the best deck in the format, but we've already seen the counter with it with Rampardos and Lucario, and now these other two decks, the Darkrai and Weavile EX and the Starmie EX and Palkia EX, both got a win over these decks. And so what's really cool to see is like how well will those other decks continue to do. This deck is really strong because of how consistent it can be, right? You have your Dialgos, you have your Arceus EX, you have your full benches, that Shaman being able to heal 10 every single turn, your Giant Cape for more sustain, the potions, the Giovanni to hit those breakpoints. Because you're running just primarily basics in this deck, you get to run so many different kinds of supporter cards here as well, which makes this deck powerful. However, we're starting to see if you can outpace this deck, then that means you have a good chance of winning. And that's exactly what the Darkrai EX and Weavile EX does, because all you need is 1 energy for Weavile EX, and you're chomping away at 70 plus the 20 that you're continuing to receive on the chip end. And then for the Starmie EX and Palkia EX, you're dealing 90 while you're building up for that 150. And if you can see here, nothing survives 150, and everything goes down to in 2 hits with the Starmie EX there. So this deck is still really strong. It's still very consistent, and so now you're just hoping on the other end that your opponents don't get their draws very quickly and things fall more on your way for this. But this still feels like a really contender of sticking to that best deck format. Up next, we have a Glade EX Hitmonlee deck that went 12-1, and this deck is really cool because once again, you're looking at things that are being creative, right? Folks are like, here's the consistent deck with Dialga and Arceus, how do I answer it while still feeling very good about it as well? And this is another deck that we talk about when it comes to pacing does strong. So while yes, you do have your stage 2 in here with the Lady X, however, it only needs 2 energies. So once you put 1 up on your routes, you're pretty much all set and ready to go when it comes to energy. Your Hitmonlee here only requires 1 energy, and your Marshadow only needs 1. So the ideal setup here is your Hitmonlee is attacking some of the bench that's out there. Your Marshadow is lined up ready to swing for that 100 damage or even 120 in terms of weakness if it hits there. And then your Glade EX can finish off, because all of these decks that we're seeing are energy hungry, and that 170 HP can mean that this deck can last for a long time. The Rocket Helmet here also being able to chip away, your Hitmonlee being able to chip away, puts Glade EX in a very interesting spot of being able to be an actually great final game sweeper here for you against the types of decks that you're looking to face. Here's another deck that is also starting to run Mars, so it's kind of interesting to see if this is actually becoming more optimal as we're seeing them throughout some of these top decks. Up next, we have the Rampardos and Lucario deck as we talk about these EX builds and like how strong that they are. We can't forget that this Rampardos Lucario deck feels really good into those decks as well, because all of these Pokemon are just 1 points with the likes of leading on Sudowoodo that can hit for 50, 70 on weakness, and then with the Lucario can deal up to 90. 2 Lucarios can deal up 110 damage for just 1 point is kind of insane if you get your board right. This Rampardos here being able to attack for 150 with just 1 Lucario out is also really strong. And this drawback of dealing 50 damage to yourself doesn't feel all that bad if you're able to take out 2 points away from the opponent while you're only really damaging yourself up for 1. Being able to have your Marshadow and your Sudowoodo on your fallbacks here, being able to have that boost up from the Lucario really positions this deck to do really well against these basic EX decks that are looking to try to take over the meta, and this deck feels like a really good counterbalance of being like, whoa everybody, let's chill. So I really like what this can do, and it seems to be holding up fairly well against the field of the decks that we're seeing. And up next we have an 18 trainer deck. This deck isn't going anywhere. This deck isn't going anywhere, and you can run it with either 2 Articuno EX or 2 Palkia EXs, both of which are fine, and both of which are kind of like going up and down each weekend as which one's the better one to play. So overall, what I'm saying is that like whichever one that you like better, go for it. This deck, its upper hit is 80 plus a 30 because you're also attacking the bench for 10, whereas a Palkia EX deck, your upper end is 150, but you're losing that energy there. So kind of like what you feel to play around that. This deck is what's interesting here is that they're opting not to run the Mars, and instead that they're running 1 red card here, which is like feels a little different from what I've seen before. But in the grand scheme of things, right, you're only allowed to play 1 like supporter per turn. And so if like you're seeing that they're building up to something and you want to heal or you want to Cyrus up and you want to mess things around, having your red card here allows you to do both at the same time, in which you couldn't do with Mars. So while Mars may like bring them down to just 1 card if they've knocked out their Articuno, your red card can be played on top of a supporter being played as well. So this right here, I think, is like the generic build now for these water decks. You're getting your heals, you're able to switch around the board, you have your Misties for your ramp as well, but now having this red card here as like a piece of being able to play on top of the supporters could be really strong. And I don't know if this is what I want to face against in the ranked, and it feels like we probably will be heading there. Gotta brace yourselves, winter is coming, y'all. Winter, ice Pokemon, get it? All right, let me stop. All right, another deck that we got going on is a Carnivine focused deck with RCSEX. Carnivine's really cool here because with RCSEX out on the field, this does an additional 30 damage. So it does 1 energy for 20, and then so you can do 1 energy for 50 damage here. They are splashing in the Rotom, the electric Rotom, which is colorless energy. And what works out for here is if your opponent's active Pokemon has a Poke Tool, this does an additional 30 damage. Then you have your Rotom that allows you to attack for 20 on the bench. And then the Shaman here, which allows any basic Pokemon a free retreat. Or, well, I'm not gonna say free retreat, it just allows them to retreat for 1 less. But as you can see, Carnivine has 1 retreat, Rotom has 1 retreat, or both Rotoms, and then your RCSEX is retreating just for 1. This deck build up here is pretty cool. Your main attackers obviously are your Carnivine and your RCSEX, but having your Psychic Rotom to soften things up to be in that 130 breakpoint is pretty cool. Also having this Rotom here, we know that there's a lot of Pokemon tools. People love their Rocky Helmets, people love their giant capes, so having these as kind of like a tech piece is a pretty interesting thought here, something that I would not have thought about before. And they are only running 1 giant cape here for this deck. Quite a slew of just different slew of different supporters here. I really like the addition of Dawn to kind of like get your RCSEX powered up here. If you have your Shaman, you're attacking with Carnivine. Carnivine might just be able to go down. You just have the 1 energy on RCSEX. That means that it's live at any point. If you have Dawn in your hand, they retreat for free. They Dawn it up and attack for that 130 that your opponent was inspecting right away. So that's a really cool thing. I really like the Dawn plays in a lot. And so when I can see them in decks, I like to call them out because I think it's really cool to be able to catch your opponent off guard in those cases here. And so really sweet build, allowing you to maneuver around the board a lot to really kind of like pinpoint and attack what's in front of you, and that's really cool to see with this shaman here. All right, so here we have this Manaphy Palkia EX deck, which is like really cool. Again, we have a just more basics, right? Like we're running into like a basic kind of meta here. So we have Manaphy, Palkia EX, Origin Form Palkia, and Regice. Regice is now starting to see a little bit of love in some of these decks that are coming up here. Origin Form for 3 energy, you can attack for 60. If you flip a coin and it hits heads, you're hitting for 120. And this is one of those things where it's kind of like, you're not really building up Origin Form Palkia on its own, right? Like you're hoping to hit it with your Manaphy, and so that way that can build up. So like that 3 energy isn't really 3 energy. Regice for 2 energy, you're dealing for 50, but just so to note, 110 HP for Regice as just a basic, and 120 for Origin Form Palkia as just a basic. So really high HP for them. You have the one area to kind of keep these alive. You have your giant capes, your rocky helmet, and then again we're starting to see Mars here. So I don't know. Maybe I gotta reevaluate what Mars does, because we're starting to see them more, and these decks are doing really well with them in it here. And these Pokemon here, your Palkia and your Regice, you're attacking with them as you're building up your sweeper with Palkia EX. So if this Manaphy goes down, you have an option of like what you want to lead into as another powerful basic, and then having them then attack your Palkia EX. So that way they still have to go through 3 Pokemon, but the number 2 and number 3 are still really strong hitters. Up next is another Arceus EX variation. It seems like when we were thinking about this card in the beginning of the set and just kind of indicating what would be a meta staple, we said Arceus EX would. We weren't really sure of like how all of the different abilities are shaken out, but it just seems like outside of 2, this ability is going really well, and just kind of a more optimized list of the dark style Arceus, Arceus EX deck. So you're running two Crobat lines here. There's this question of the Golbat, and the Golbat here is the genetic apex one, so they're opting to do for more damage instead of your triumphant like Golbat, which deals 30 but it has more HP here. You have 2 Drudgeodons up front to kind of like give yourself some space and time to build that up, and then you have your Darkrai EX and your Crobat and your Drudgeodon all dealing damage here, right? This is dealing 30 to your active, this is dealing 20 to the active, this is dealing 20 again to the active if they are deciding to attack here. So you can build up your Arceus EX and still chip away with your Crobat. Once this is at 2 and it's ready to go, you start building up your Darkrai, and that's still very powerful. So there's a lot that your opponent has to get through, and by that time that they're ready to get through everything, their health is just gone, right? Like just going through Crobat, Drudgeodon, and Darkrai EX can net you a point or 2 before you're even actually attacking, which is insane. So this deck has a really good feel to it, and being able to see it perform well this weekend and having a strong showing feels really validating when we got to play it already on the channel. And the last deck that we're going to talk about is the Arceus EX Executor EX version, and this deck also feels really strong. We've played this one as well too, and again feels very validating to see it do well in a tournament setting. What the name of this game is just attack for 1 energy while you're powering up your Arceus EX. Executor EX loves being able to tank up front because it just takes 1 energy. It's 160. You're going through the heals, you're going through the giant cape here. So there's a lot of health that you have to get through for Executor EX, and so that allows you to build up your Arceus EX in the back. Carnivine is doing its miniature version of it, because while you can get up to 80 damage for your Executor EX, Carnivine nets you 50 with Arceus EX on the bench, but again gives you that flavor because it only needs 1 energy to attack. So you're putting that pressure on them while you're building up this powerful attacker in the back, and so it's a very hard for the opponent to have to get through that, especially when you get sustained in that 50 health back with Erica as well. So yeah, y'all, this weekend really showed that like people are not staying still. They're not saying these are the only things that we can be playing, and the creativity continues to come out. Seeing 2 winners that are not Dialga and Arceus really goes to show the creativity that you can have in this game, and I'm excited to like come back next week and just talk through more of what the creativity looks like and what these decks are. Let me know down below if you've played any of these decks before and like what luck you're having, and if you haven't yet, which deck you would like to pick up and start playing because you've seen it through this report. All right, y'all, until the next one, everybody, take it easy. Peace.